Welcome back, guys. Post some democratic discussion between the three of us, we've decided to rename our channel SuryaCast. So, welcome back to SuryaCast, where we talk of everything under the shining light of Surya. And jumping off of last time, we are going to talk about World War II. I'll start off with Rohit. So, Rohit, please tell me something about the war.
Recording.
About the Second World War and about your insights on this bloody, violent, and incredibly crazy part of human history.
Yeah, thank you, Shiva. So, I actually lived in China for a couple of years and Singapore. So, I always had this doubt in Singapore and Southeast Asia specifically, where they had a lot of hate for Japanese, especially in Singapore and Malaysia. I always wondered why. What did the Japan do, and what was their history in these regions? And then I actually went and researched and found out a lot about Japanese and how they were involved in World War II, right? And I came across something called the Pacific War, which is kind of important but really not mentioned as much as the European side of the World War II. I think it's because it was towards the east, and most of it is, the knowledge is lesser to an extent. History wasn't kept as much as in the West, right? So, starting at the basics, right? Pacific War was the largest geographical theater of World War II. It covered the most distance in World War II. And there were four basic parts. One was the Pacific Ocean. Second was the Southwest Pacific. Third was the China-Japanese War. And finally was the Soviet-Japanese War. So it all starts off with the Japan and China fight, which roots in 1890s because of Korea. So Japan and China fought in its first war called Sino-Japan War over the control of Korea.
This was World War I or this was II?
Before World War I. It was 1890s.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so it was called Sino-Japan War, the first one, and where Korea was basically, it had one ruler and Korea wasn't not powerful, but it had the resources. So Japan and China fought over, or then it was not called China, it was called the Qing dynasty. There they both fought over who would get the control of Korea and who would get the most of the resources, and Japan won that. And then they had a treaty signed, and Japan got a lot of power over Korea and a lot of resources from them. And then World War I happened, and something that happened in 1920s, which affected the whole world, was the Great Depression. And Japan was in a very tight situation. They were losing a lot of money. They had no resources. The island of Japan doesn't have many natural resources itself. So it wanted to enter China to get more resources. And China then, because of the dynasty politics, there was a lot of kingdoms which were breaking down. So it was a little weak and ripe for taking. So in 1931, what Japanese did, very interestingly, Japan then controlled the railways in China. So in 1931, they actually put a bomb on their own track, exploded it, acted as if Chinese did it, and used that as an excuse to attack China.
I was actually looking at it, the same thing. It was probably something that, Japan had faked, in fact. It was the bombing of the railway, right? Okay. And it blamed China for it.
Correct. Okay. So that's how they started the invasion of Manchuria in China. And it was in 1931. And it was called the Mukden incident. And no one knew, since for many years later they found out that it was actually the Japanese who faked the incident and used that as an excuse to attack China. So in 1931, officially the war between China and Japan started. And then what happened was that the next 6 years they formed a fake dummy government in the area of Manchuria, where they put a Chinese leader but was controlled by the Japanese. And you should know that at this stage, Japan was completely a military led government, meaning like how Pakistan is now. Military was much more powerful than the government. So the military controlled whatever. So for example, the government would say, please do not expand more than this. It would lead to a more let's say US or someone, Russia, saying, putting sanctions on us, so do not expand more than this. But the military was military. They never they never stopped. They said, oh, something happened, and they would always start a mission again and start expanding the land again. So at that stage, Japanese military was very strong, and they kept attacking China. And by 1937, they had control of a lot of Manchurian region in China. And what happened in 1937 was they had another fake incident called the Marco Polo Bridge incident, which was very interesting. So there was a guy in the Japanese patrol who went missing. The story is that he had an upset stomach, and then he went to clear his nature's call in the jungle. The guy, Japanese guy, the patrol.
So this is a incident that starts off with a guy having an upset stomach.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I just want to ask you one question though. So when Japan was militarily very advanced or very aggressive, did they have conscription or something of that kind, or didn't make sense to ask if they had conscription at that time?
They didn't, but they started having that later on.
They started having that
later on. But because then Japanese military was so strong that it was a sense of pride to be in the military. So they didn't need to have subscription then.
People voluntarily did it. Okay.
So in 1937, this Marco Polo incident, where this soldier was not seen for some time, Japan assumed that on the other side of the bridge, which was Chinese occupied, the Chinese had a hand in this. Even though the guy came back after some time, they used that as an excuse, saying the Chinese had a hand in the disappearance of a soldier, and they attacked. And there was a small war, let's say a battle, and Japanese won that. And they started again advancing, and they conquered Peking, now Beijing. And
oh wow, they went all the way to Beijing.
Yeah, and then they attacked Nanjing. And Nanjing, the attack of Nanjing was supposed to be one of the worst attacks in the history of the world, where it was called the rape of Nanjing, because they were raping 1,000 women a day. It was because
unspeakable horrors were done by. They did some horrible things also to the South Korean, to Korea. I think there was no South Korea at that time. To Korea, right?
Yeah. So Japanese were horrible with the prisoner of wars. It was if you see the movie, I think Angelina Jolie did. She directed a movie. It was basically how horrible they treated their prisoner of wars, and so you can see in the Chinese too. The Japanese officially, one guy in the government actually came up and said that we consider the Chinese as dogs. We don't consider them as humans. They are less than humans, so they should not be treated like humans. And they were treated horribly. They were raped. 1,000 people were raped. 1,000 women were raped every day in Nanjing. They completely destroyed the cities. And what they did was, Japanese, when they conquered the city, they just burnt it. They didn't conquer it, they did not have hold on it. They were very horrible people then, the army. So they just destroyed everything.
Wow.
And then as this was happening, the US and everyone stood up, and they said we should sanction Japan for this. So they started embargoing oil. And Japan couldn't live without oil for more than 2 years. So the government said, okay, so this kind of stopped the invasion for some bit, and they started expanding into this Dutch East Indies, which was Indonesia now. It was colonized by Dutch then.
What I kind of heard or have this vague understanding is that Japan kind of conquered a lot of China, Korea and all of that.
Yeah.
Or invaded it. The West came and said, you can't do this.
No, you can't do this. They put an embargo. Sanctions.
Right,
basically.
they put sanctions, and the Japan retreated because it could
not retreat, but they kind of calculated that the oil would get over in 2 years, and they would have no fuel because they don't have natural resources. That's why they attacked China too. Right. So that's why they said, and Indonesia does have a lot of natural gas and oil. So they said, let's attack, or not Indonesia. Then it was called the Dutch East Indies, colonized by the Dutch, and they attacked Indonesia or Dutch East Indies. The luck they had was Indonesia were already suffering from years and years of Dutch suppression. And so it was very easy to conquer Indonesia. So Indonesia is the few countries in Southeast Asia which loves Japan. because they got rid of their suppressors. Basically the colonizers. Japan came in and they removed the colonizers.
Right. Right.
So,
Very nice. Very
so they have a
interesting.
very good positive vibe on Japanese, even now in Indonesia. So, and which is very rare in that kind of area. And they removed them. They got control of Indonesia then, and then they attacked French Indonesia. It's called French Indochina. French Indochina basically is now Laos and Cambodia, which was then colonized by French.
Yeah, Vietnam.
So
was
if you see the
colonized.
commonalities here, all those places are all colonies of different European countries.
Right.
So one was by France, one was by UK, like Hong Kong was UK, and then the Dutch conquered Indonesia. So they were all colonies, and they were attacking these countries, and they were gaining each a foothold into each. Then they attacked Malaysia. And Singapore was part of Malaysia then. So they attacked the Malay Peninsula. Then so there was one country in between all this called Philippines. Now Philippines was basically a US base. It was a US ally. So since a lot of years, and US and someone called General MacArthur, who's very famous in US. He has a lot of highways named after him. So he used to be stationed there, and then they attacked. So what happened was they used a cover of Pearl Harbor to attack and conquer Philippines. So people know Pearl Harbor for a US entry into the World War II, right? US entered because of Japan, right? So when US entered when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, it used that cover, and it attacked Philippines and got a hold of Philippines also. So imagine the amount of islands and amount of land they had conquered by the time Pearl Harbor had ended. It included French Indochina, which is Cambodia, Laos, and a part of Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore now, Indonesia, Philippines, Burma. They had just made inroads into Burma, and they also attacked New Guinea. So the amount of attacking and the advancement and the aggressiveness they were showing was incredible. The speed at which they were doing it. So and because they had attacked all these, they had attacked Dutch, they attacked French colonies. It slowly kind of merged into the World War II. It was a separate war that was going on its own, and because it was attacking these colonies, what happened was Germany, which was supporting China till then, they wanted China support for resources, Germany and Italy. So because Japan attacked China, Germany started going towards Japan, saying, hey Japan, we are friends now. So until then they were supporting China, and then suddenly went towards Japan.
Germany and Italy were very good friends also,
because it was Hitler and Mussolini.
Because Hitler and Mussolini.
Yeah.
And then in fact I know that Hitler kind of sent troops into Spain also for the Spanish Civil War.
Correct.
In order to support Franco.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of started a pact with Japan. I wasn't clear on why they started a pact with Japan.
Yeah, because of resources in China.
Because of the resources in China.
Yeah, because they were actually trying to get a treaty done with China. They were supporting China. They were sending a lot of stuff before Japan attacked them. Once Japan attacked them and the scale of war that was happening there, Germany went towards Japan. They said, let's be friends now.
Okay.
Because Japanese army was very strong. And one certain incident was in Shanghai. It is supposed to be the second biggest battle outside Stalingrad, but there were 750,000 Chinese and 250,000 Japanese. But 250,000 well-trained Japanese soldiers, and 25% of 750 were kind of trained, and remaining were all kind of civilians. And it was a horrible battle, Shanghai. And so that's how it kind of merged into the World War II. And and the stories that people have on the Japanese, the horrors that they conducted, they were say that it was because the Japanese didn't think they would have so much resistance in China, that they got even more angrier, because they thought it would be much easier, and then because they fought so much, they kind of they committed more atrocities as they went forward.
Hold on a second. Can I make a
observation here?
Yes, please. This sounds like an England of the East.
Yeah.
They went conquering. I didn't know they went conquering all the way to Burma.
Japan were very belligerent colonizers and extremely ruthless.
Yeah.
They were the only, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were the only Eastern powers or Asian powers who were actually colonizers and they were not colonized.
Yeah, correct.
And
Thailand also was never colonized.
Thailand also was never colonized, but they were but Thailand never colonized. They were not colonizers, I guess.
Correct,
Thailand,
correct,
okay. Japan were the only colonizers.
Yeah.
Go on.
Japan, but their colonizing was very different to like the other. Like for example, in India, if you see the British came, they used India as a resource. When British entered India, India was having 25% of the world GDP. When they left, it was less than 5%. So they completely utilized it, removed everything, and UK was 8% when they came in, and they almost went up to 30% by the time they left India. So they kind of removed everything from India. But Japan was different. It was just taking the resources and killing everything. It was just looking at the short-term goals. And one last interesting thing before I pass it on to Shiva to talk about Burma and how India got involved was that originally Japanese in 1920s got a lot of their tank designs and their ideas from France and UK. So later on the tanks that they bought, it was called I think Renault N1C, was French light tanks, by the company Renault that everyone knows. So they actually got a lot of their designs and ideas from France and UK. So imagine they got all the tanks ideas. They also tried to get it from UK, the tanks, but they didn't have. UK was having problem enough to supply their own army, so they couldn't supply Japan. So they were actually getting all the ideas from UK and France, and then later they were again in a war against them.
Hold on a second. So Japan is buying this intellectual property, or
they were sending people to France. They had an agreement with the government of France. And
okay,
UK.
so there were people going there, learning how it's done, coming back and doing it themselves. The manufacturing IP.
Correct.
Just like how Jeep gave rights to Mahindra and stuff like that. Okay, I understand.
So they were learning all these stuff there, and then they build their own tanks for the world.
In the sense, this is happening when the war is ongoing.
No, this is before the war.
This is before.
Before anything, anyone where Hitler was still starting off.
I understand. Okay.
So it was then Japan learned all this and then used all this against them, basically. So Japan had a big role, and then I'll come back to this again. But so as they were attacking all these countries, they attacked Burma, and then they saw India as a great target, and this is where Shiva comes in.
So what they actually wanted was an ally in India, okay, because they wanted to go on the offensive, okay, and get into India. And the way they did this is that they started to kind of recruit a lot of Indian soldiers, prisoners of war, into the Indian National Army led by Mohan Singh. And of course, we know the story of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who kind of saw this as an opportunity. The saying goes, the enemy's enemy is a friend. That it is actually said that Netaji first went to Stalin, okay, and said that, look, the British is doing horrible things to us. We need your support. And Stalin kind of gave him a cold shoulder. Therefore, he enlisted the help of, because he was a socialist. He was a committed socialist. Okay, Subhash Chandra Bose was a committed socialist. He was, I'm not quite sure if he was a full-blown, or maybe he was a full-blown communist. I'm not 100% sure about that, but he was a full-blown socialist, and he reluctantly started to enlist the help of Hitler, of Germany.
Weren't there photos of Subhash Chandra Bose next to Hitler, anything in Germany or Berlin, wasn't it?
There were photos, but the problem that I have of speaking anything with Subhash Chandra Bose is there are a lot of mystique around him.
Correct.
Okay, there's this thing that he's still alive. Some people still believe that he's still alive to that extent.
Not now, but maybe 1980s there was a guy called Gumnami Baba.
Gumnami Baba, right.
And they assumed, because he looked apparently a lot like Subhash Chandra Bose. He knew a lot of history about stuff that only Subhash Chandra Bose would know. And no one saw him. Like he was always behind a curtain.
Right, Gumnami Baba was there, and then there was the story of how he was executed, okay, by Indian powers. Okay, some people like to blame everything on Nehru, so they said Nehru executed him, right? All of these things were floating around, so I kind of tread with caution with regards to the aura around Subhash Chandra Bose. But some things are definitely there, is that he led the Indian National Army, the Azad Hind Fauj, It was formed in Singapore, right? And he actually wanted to, in 1942, there was the Palel airfield in Kakching, Manipur. And it was the final phase actually of World War II, and the Japanese offensive was to kind of like go from the Burma-India border, right, into Northeast India. And the Japanese army actually had divisions, the 15th Division, the 31st Division, and the 33rd Division. And there was the Azad Hind Fauj Division of Netaji. And the what's actually interesting over here is that the regiment that came into Northeast India, right, was the 2nd Guerrilla Regiment, okay, called the Gandhi Brigade. It was the first division after the revival of the Indian National Army by Subhash Chandra Bose.
Was it a kind of a play on, like, Gandhi was supposed to be non-violent, so they kind of made fun of Gandhi by saying
I
Gandhi
can't
Brigade?
attribute those intentions to those people. I would probably give them the benefit of doubt and say maybe they did it out of respect. Because one thing that we have to understand sometimes is that when you have people like big figures, probably they don't have a lot of animosity amongst each other or personal rivalry. It's generally the fans of these people or people who kind of like, you know, admire these individuals who end up coming with that personal animosity that this guy hates that guy. They probably had ideological differences and respected each other for those ideological differences and said, you know, we have nothing personal, but we have ideological differences, let's just go that way, right? So Subhash Chandra Bose never thought, for that matter, that non-violent means would ever bring independence to India, okay? And he was right. Okay, there was no way. Attlee himself confirmed that it was Gandhi had nothing to do with the independence of India. Okay, it had everything to do with the fact that the sentiment that the Indian National Army kind of engendered in India against the British was such that if all of India ended up rebelling against the British, because people, the civilians and the soldiers alike, if they ended up rebelling against the British, which was already weakened after World War II, things would have been disastrous for them. So they were smart enough to kind of, you know, pack their bags and leave. But anyways, coming back to the invasion, what actually was the Gandhi Brigade kind of wanted to kind of like, there were these air bases, these airfields, and the first thing that they wanted to actually do is bomb those airfields, okay, to destroy those airfields. And they were actually destroyed also. They were destroyed, and this was a big blow to the British, because the British were using this, okay, and supporting the US also. So Stilwell was actually using this, okay, against his fight, okay, in, I think, Africa. Let me just actually fact check that for you if that's correct, if this was Africa.
Who was Stilwell? Did you say
Stilwell was an American general.
Okay.
He was fighting on the side of the Allies. America was also fighting on the side of the Allies, right? So that was Stilwell, right? And of course, you know, lots of things were going on, but yeah. So now what happens is that the Battle of Pillbox actually takes place. This is when the British defeats the Japanese offensive, right? And after the Japanese offensive are defeated, the Masakazu Kawabe, who's the general of the Japanese general, tells Subhash Chandra Bose that, look, we have to retreat. But he doesn't listen. Bose does not listen, right? And he goes on a huge, you know, rampage, and his army ends up getting defeated, of course. But what happens at the end of the day is that the sentiments that he engendered in the people ends up, you know, being useful. So it's like he himself kind of says this in 1943 in July 5th, when he takes charge from Raj Bihari Bose, that we may not live to see a free India, but we will fight for free India. And his speech actually turns out to be one of the most impressive speeches one could possibly ever made. Okay, and the whole INA was ecstatic and said that we will fight tooth and nail. We may not see a free India, but we will fight for her. So that was that. And one more thing that is essentially there is that this battle between the British Indian troops, okay, between the Allies, and the Battle of Kohima, as it is essentially called, the Siege of Kohima, is a very hardly known part of history, is a hardly known part, or rather it's a very little known part of World War II and not really spoken about. People generally speak about Stalingrad, or they speak about Hitler going on the offensive, and they may even talk about the Italian occupation of Ethiopia. Okay, because Mussolini kind of actually occupied Ethiopia at one point of time, right? So they talk about even that, right?
I did not know Ethiopia was occupied.
A lot of
Oh, there was.
I thought
go on, please.
Ethiopia was the only African country which was not under occupation. So that's wrong. Ethiopia was occupied by.
It was occupied by Mussolini.
Okay.
It's supposed to be really ugly battle too. Like a lot of, I think, chemical warfare and stuff that happened. Was it in Ethiopia? Somewhere in France. I remember Mussolini doing a lot of war crimes in Africa.
Mussolini did do a lot of war crimes in Africa. What's also interesting is that he actually started off as a socialist.
True.
He started off as a socialist, as a leftist. He was in fact anti-war during World War I.
The one thing about Mussolini which I understood is that he kept changing stuff for his benefit. Like he started off, like you said, as a socialist because at that point the World War I was happening and he wanted to be an opposition to the existing government. So he became, hey, I'm anti-war. And then later, because Italy was falling off, they said, hey, we want to go to war. So he kept changing his stance according to his benefits to get into power. And because he changed his view, he came into power. And that's how he kept using the local sentiment.
That is to a certain extent true, and of course one can never really know the intentions of that person, of what he actually did. But what happened is he started off as a socialist. He would rally for anti-war and anti-war protests in Italy. But he saw World War I, right, as a way to get away with monarchy. So because he was a socialist, he saw that there was a lot of monarchy all over Europe. And he wanted monarchy to be completely destroyed because, of course, he would want that as a socialist. So he saw World War I as an opportunity to do that. Of course, his fellow socialists said, we are all anti-war, get lost, we are not going to support you. So what he ended up doing is that is when he flipped. He said that we have to unify this nation, right? Okay, and he called it fascismo, which is nothing but something, it alludes to a matchstick actually, like how matchsticks kind of hold together, and he that way became a fascist. And he was I think he was the first dictator of Europe and also the first fascist, okay, to be there.
Father of fascism.
Father of fascism. He wrote the book, The Fascist Manifesto, with Giovanni Gentile. Giovanni Gentile, I'm not quite sure if Gentile is the right pronunciation, but some Italian guy. And that Italian guy was a neo-Hegelian. Marx was a young Hegelian. So both fascism and communism find their roots in Hegel. I found that to be an interesting bit of information. But anyways, again coming back to the Battle of Kohima, the Siege of Kohima as it is called. There's a BJP MLA who kind of wrote this, and his name is Monlumo Kikon.
Sorry for the pronunciation.
Yeah, I've tried to pronounce his name as nicely as I possibly could, but yeah, he's a Nagaland BJP candidate. And he wrote this book, His Majesty's Headhunters, The Siege of Kohima That Shaped World History. And how much of hyperbole exists here or how much it doesn't is something that I cannot really attest for. But it's a very well-researched book. I'm still in the process, in the middle of reading it. I cannot completely say that I've digested everything and understood it. But he talks about it from the Nagaland's perspective, from the Naga perspective, and says that, or rather what he's asserting, what my understanding of it is, if I understand it correctly, is that if not for the Naga headhunter tribe, the Japanese army would not have been defeated. If the Japanese army would not have been defeated, it would have taken Imphal, it would have taken the northeast corridor of India, and along with the Azad Hind Fauj, you know what else could have happened, nobody knows. It would have come all the way to Kolkata maybe, right? And things could have been, the history could have been very different. It was like a very defining point of what would have happened if things went the other way, if not for the Naga tribe. So that's his approach. So it's generally called, this battle is actually called the Stalingrad of the East. But then, the Allied forces would have been defeated in Kohima. The Japanese army would have easily secured the Dimapur railway station and victoriously moved from Bengal via Assam and would have reversed the outcome of the war. Would that have reversed the outcome of war is a counterfactual that none of us can really, it's a counterfactual. We can never really know what would have happened.
At what point did Netaji disappear? Like at what stage?
What point did he disappear? I do not know when he actually disappeared.
Which year? Which year did he disappear? Because that was a big conspiracy theory, yes. And they say that if he hadn't disappeared, Japanese would have, like you said, we don't know, but the Japanese would have made much more advancements with Subhash Chandra Bose still being alive and present.
The Japanese army was completely defeated after a point. They was not there anymore, and Subhash Chandra Bose, and India won and the British left already. So if he died in a plane crash.
Correct.
Mostly that's the point. That's the yeah.
Pause. I'm going to
I'll
relink the.
Yeah.
this. Wait, hold on. What's the timestamp? Timestamp is write the timestamp down. 34 minutes to 35. Check connection.
He died in
1945.
45,
Yeah, he disappeared in 1945, 18th August 1945.
I'd like to make another observation here.
Yes, please.
The dumb side of me is saying that Subhash Chandra Bose is the OG Tupac Shakur of his time. So still lives.
Okay, still lives.
Still lives.
But also it was interesting in the sense that he did not want democracy, he did not want elections for almost 20 to 30 years of independent India.
Who?
Subhash Chandra Bose.
He was
To do
basically
what?
Communist.
Not just because of that, but his reasons was that India is an extremely poor country. Okay, the British left us in absolutely
Ruins.
dire states.
Yeah.
Absolute
Shambles.
ruins. You can't have what will you do with voting? What's the point? We need to consolidate, we need to create industry, and democracy is only going to slow down this it's going to lead to stasis. One of the things with democracy is that it's a feature of democracy, not a bug, right? Is that it leads to a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. Now, why is that a feature, not a bug? Is that you end up doing something with good intentions and it may have extremely disastrous consequences. It is precisely to be like, okay, it is better to not do anything than do something and have disastrous consequences. That's the point. So it's like, if I act with well intentions saying that I'm going to do something good, but that backfires and leads to a lot of problems, I'd rather not act, okay, and keep discussing whether this is going to be correct or not, and then take an action, than simply act, okay, and then regret later that was a bad policy, right? So in some sense, I guess that's the whole structure of democracy. And he said that we can't do that, we can't afford that, because we are extremely poor as a country at this point, and we really have to expedite our whole development process and really, really go forward in the world economic plane. So that's what he wanted. So he did not want that. And I think a dude called Alexei Arora put it well on Twitter that he, let me just go back here. These 3 points, okay, of Netaji that he kind of he believed Bose was responsible for our freedom, okay, not Gandhi, who believed Attlee. Bose wanted a 20-year dictatorship after independence. He believed in a synthesis of non-racial fascism and non-atheistic communism. So that's kind of what he believed. So one of the things again with fascism is that you have ethnicities or minorities who end up getting hunted. And with communism, everybody has to be an atheist, and religion is a problem which nobody is going to agree to. That's also a huge problem. So if you can kind of take away these two bad features of both and have this sort of a synthesis, then India can grow, is what he kind of believed in. And that was Bose for you. Very interesting man, I must say.
It's very interesting. I didn't know.
Makes sense. In one way, yeah, I agree. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I take away from there. I move on to Japanese now conquering Philippines, and then US at this stage, right, was busy at they were deciding whether to enter the World War or not. and kind of the Pearl Harbor kind of fast forward their decision to enter the war, but they actually thought Europe was going to be the first step. They didn't come this side. They thought, let Philippines be. We'll come after we had taken care of Germany and Italy. We'll come back to take back Philippines. And General MacArthur, who had left Philippines and went to, he had by then retreated to Australia. And in Australia, he had made a vow that he was going to go back to Philippines and then conquer it back from Japanese. The problem with Japanese attacks is basically they were ruthless, number one. Number two, you could never get a Japanese prisoner of war because they did kamikaze, the suicide attack. It was basically either you die or the other. When they die, they take the other person and then die. And even then, the last ditch attack was called Banzai attack, which like everyone just jumps out and then runs for the enemy, like surprises the enemy with the speed. So it's basically they didn't care about dying.
It's all about Japanese. I thought the Japanese army is all about speed and not about power.
Yeah, correct.
It's just Blitzkrieg was what he did. No, Hitler did.
Yeah. But it was similar mentality.
Similar mentality, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So they just attack. They don't care for life, and it was very difficult to fight the Japanese because of that. And
even according to their own reports, it was honorable for them to die in battle.
Correct.
Okay, than not dying, then retreat. Okay,
Correct.
like a coward. Right.
And I think it's because of the samurai and ideologies. The culture was the same. Like the culture that they took from centuries of different the samurai and all that was they would rather die in battle than retreat.
They actually went through 200 years of isolationism.
Correct.
They would isolated themselves for 200 years, and even now Japan is a very isolationist kind of a culture.
Yeah. Even the government right now, just coming off the subject, different subject, but the government right now in Japan, they're giving money because the average age is so high. They're giving money to foreigners to come and settle in Japan and produce, like, have a kid, because the population is so bad right now. It's there's a big issue now, and they're so closed off. The culture itself is so closed off. They don't care much for the outer world. Like, they don't care about the foreigners. They don't know how the cultures of other people are. So it's kind of the outlook is not very great. They don't have much of information, even though they're not not like China where internet is controlled and everything like that. But
they choose themselves.
Yeah.
I think in one way, I think that's not bad of an idea. So,
but extreme of it is still bad, right? Yeah. And when you said you were in Japan for some time, so how was it like? How were the people there?
So July 2016, I visited Japan and we got a visa for 14 days exactly. Now, with my understanding, I think that was like the norm of any country. Getting a visitor's visa was like for a 14-day period. Tokyo and the other main cities in Japan were very friendly people. They're very humble. Like one instance was I just stopped somebody, and this is, I think, the beginning stages of Google Translate, right? Like, you'd want to know where to go. So I stopped one individual and asked him where this address was. To my knowledge, I thought he was pointing me to the direction and also going to that direction, but he actually went out of his way and took us to that place that we were supposed to go. And then he said, "This is the place," and he bows down and then he walks away. So this happened in Tokyo, and we were like, whoa, hold on a second. He took time out of his day to do this for a...
How long did it take for you to go there?
Pretty long, like 12 minutes. So
he actually took that much time to actually take you to that place?
We walked, yeah. He took us to that place. I didn't understand. I thought he was leading us to wherever we were going, as well as he was going as well. So
very nice.
So what happened was, like, he didn't understand what we were trying to say. We did not understand what he was trying to say. So he said, I'm not going to waste time speaking with these people. I'm just going to take them to the destination and leave them and then go about my way. Food, everything, just at that point in time, I don't think I even tried sushi or anything, so missed out on that.
Did you try, just to ask you, I'm curious about this. Did you try that fish in Japan that is poisonous, puffer fish?
No, dude.
Or is it called something else?
No, it is called puffer
It's
fish.
called
Yeah,
puffer
they
fish,
they
yeah.
cook it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they cook it in
It's a
some
very
kind of a way that you
risky
don't.
affair.
Yeah, so is a way of eating it, apparently. So if you eat it the wrong way, you're dead.
What's the wrong way? What's
I
the
have
right
no
way?
clue.
Okay. You
I just
don't
know
want to
that
know
there's
also.
a way of eating it, and then you eat
He's
it
not
the
gonna-
wrong way, you're dead.
He's not going to try it now.
He's not going to try it. No, but what I heard is, no, I was watching this episode by, I'm blanking on that person's name. True Reservations, Anthony Bourdain. And he has to try pufferfish the next
Lord.
morning.
Okay.
And he's heard about how difficult it is. And he's going to try it because he's Anthony Bourdain. He's no reservation. He's going to try everything.
Yeah.
Right? So he is really, really stressing about the fact that he's going to try this, and he's really scared that what might happen, because if the venom is not cleaned properly from the fish, you're dead.
You're dead.
So he's recounted his experiences that I'm going to try puffer fish now. Let's just see if things are going to go all right. Okay, if anything happens, it was a good time. I had some good food and good meals. So he was talking about that. So I remember that's one memory of Japan that kind of hit me from a culinary standpoint. Yeah.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
How else were your experiences in Japan other than like anime? You follow anime?
Okay, so
right?
when it comes to anime, yeah, they you'd see huge billboards with animes, advertisements of animes, but not animes themselves, and then advertisements of games. So the arcade games are a very, very, very big thing over there, because
The gaming culture in the world was introduced by Japanese, like the Nintendos and like the Sonys, the PlayStations,
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
Japanese, right?
yeah.
So they introduced that to the world. So
Yeah, so they have like skyscrapers with the branding of Sony, all that kinds of stuff. Hitachi, I saw all that. Well, going inside, into villages of Japan, then there's a little bit of a culture migration. So they're not that open to having people around. Us being like little dark-skinned South Asians, so there was like, wait, hold on a second, who are these guys? But still, they're not looking at you as a threat or anything. They're saying, just you exist, okay, walk by us. But yeah, trying to talk to them in those areas and trying to get somewhere was a little bit of a hassle. They would point you to the direction, but it was not that humbling, like what we saw in Tokyo. Also in the lines of anime, everybody knows the upskirt, short skirt, these schoolgirls of Japan, right? So they are all over. Actually, they are all over the place. They're actual schoolgirls, and then there are schoolgirls, girls who imitate to be a schoolgirls, but they're actually out there to give you a happy time. Yeah, so it just so happens that
Lolita kind of a moment.
yeah,
there's something in Japan called renting a girlfriend. You can rent a girlfriend for some time because they're not very open, right? They have a problem socially. So what they do is you can rent a girlfriend for 24 hours. And it's not like a physical thing. They're just standing next to you, eat dinner with you, talk to you.
yeah.
So it's just because a lot of it, the culture has kind of made a lot of them introvert. Right? The best restaurants there are restaurants which are closed off to each other, so people can't talk. People like that.
Yeah. It's like phone booths. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
restaurants.
phone booths.
I've seen those restaurants. It's like basically you buy a booth, a seat in the booth, and you order something, and it actually shows up right in front of you with on a conveyor belt.
And you don't even deal with the server or
Yeah,
the waiter.
yeah. It's so. Oh yeah, this was like a brain freeze for me. So you would have like a big LCD. And back in that time, iPad were the only LCD I knew was a damn iPad, and you'd pay some Candy Crush on it. So, but this has like a range of menus that you flip through pages, order whatever you need, and it shows up on time, like in a few minutes later. Same goes with pornography as well. Like if you go, there were hotels which are designated places where you go to jerk off, or either go take someone and then do what you need to do. So you have like options of what kind of a room that you want, everything is like visual. All that tablet that you have is on display. They show you what you are in for. So that's very digitized. And what I felt, what I came to the understanding with today's day and age, and how social media is kind of blanketed over the youth. I think Japan has been there already, done that already, because the introvertedness is because of that social media that's going on right now. Everybody's into that phone. Japan was ahead 20 years.
They're dealing with the after effects of...
yeah, they are dealing with the after effects of what could be possible in the coming years of the present scenario of this subcontinent. So Japan is so ahead in their time. If they've lived in mangas, they lived in cartoons, they lived in those certain tablets, they're not ordered food from a person that you can talk to. It's just pressing buttons and the food shows up. And another fun fact and really fun fact for me was those dispensers, Coke dispensers. In the US, we used to find them right outside the laundromat.
Right.
So it's out on the street, and there's beer in it as well. So you can see anybody can buy them, but you will not see underage people abusing their rights, in the sense go there, buy that beer and drink. No, I've never seen that, because it's all out in the open. Even in a train station, while you're getting on a train before, even on a station, it is right there. Like, it's a whole section of sodas, and then there's a whole section of beers. Anybody can take it. Just put in the dollar bill and yen bill and take it. So, but no children are abusing that. So I had a good time drinking beer all through Japan. Even in the streets, but don't litter. You can't litter. There are designated places where you have dustbins and everything.
This is where you're kind of like, socially conditioned, right? In the
social conditioning, yes.
Social conditioning actually happens. Like, if an Indian goes out to America or any Western country, he's going to be a model citizen, right? He's going to drive well, he'll stick to the lane, he won't litter. All of those things are essentially done. But the same guy will come back to Hyderabad and then take a car and then drive like a maniac, okay, with all traffic rules thrown out of the picture. It doesn't matter for him.
Exactly.
Right.
Even the depression part of it, right? There's a huge number of people who are depressed. I remember that I don't know if it was Jake Paul, one of the Paul brothers. I remember he went into a forest and recorded like people dead, hanging from trees and stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember that scene. He got a lot of backlash on it
because making jokes in middle of the forest.
And look where he's got out of that. He's a
billionaire.
Yeah, he's close to one.
Yeah. So that's a big problem in Japan. The depression. I think it's also an offshoot of, like what you said, the social media, the people living.
They've been
by
ahead
themselves.
of their time. So yeah, actually coming back to the original point where what was that? I totally forgot.
The people, the village, and the people.
Yeah. So the point where we pivoted. But anyway, the observations that I did was like Japan as a country is so advanced. I think the fact that person who took us to one place to the other, where to get to our place and then go, I thought, oh my God, one nuclear bomb and these guys just get so humble. That's the first thing that came into my mind. But actually, it's embedded in their nature to be humble like that. So then you have like a cross questioning, like, hold on a second, can the Imperial Army do so many atrocities and still be this way in their own country? Is some...
Okay, so you're getting this kind of like a mismatch between...
Yeah, like what's up, dude?
How could Japanese people do such atrocities and here they could be so essentially humble? I think after World War II and all of it, they became a very pacifist nation. Okay, they kind of demilitarized and everything.
But apparently that pacifism is has always been there in their culture. It's not been taught to them. It's not been... Nobody's handed them a textbook and said, be this way. It's always been there. So it looks like there's a section of...
You don't have to... Culture is not something that is handed to you down in textbooks, right? It is something...
No, I'm just saying.
Generally. Okay. Generally. Who knows? But I let me just take that...
That's why I said one bomb, after two freaking bombs and these guys like bow down to you. Like, okay.
I think they were always like that, though. I think maybe it was because of the times, the Great Depression. They just had that desperation, and the army got so much power more than the government.
Right.
I think once the army is more powerful than the government and controls everything, the whole the whole story changes. You've seen in so many countries, right? When the army is uncontrollable, then the country goes to shit. So
Got you.
So actually taking a segue from what Pranshu said about the after effects of Japan reeling from extreme digital exposure, and becoming an extremely introverted society, I'd like to get this back to World War II, where we all started, and kind of take a bird's eye view of how Europe and US and UK kind of reeled from the after effects of World War II.
I think the after effects, both parties
the wrapping up of it. But yeah, go on.
Both parties, Japan and Germany, the ones that lost the war, seem to have had the most amount of technological advancements, or maybe even financial advancements as well. What I saw in Japan was like, whoa, hold on a second, this is like a cyberpunk. A little bit of Japan was like, oh, hold on a second, this is too many lights that I can't manage. I can't see this, is too brightening. And it did look like cyberpunk to me in a way. Not that many skyscrapers, but if you imagine those same buildings to be as tall as it should have, like you imagine it to be, and with all that same lights that they have, it's completely cyberpunk. So, I think did Whirlpool come out of Japan? Toyota Motors, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, those guys made those planes, kamikaze planes that they bombed into.
Actually, if you see, if you just kind of have a look at it, you have Times Square, New York, and you have Japan, like a place in Japan. If you can take a picture in some way where Times Square, Japan,
merge them together.
Times Square, Japan. I'm saying. I'm just.
Okay. Is it Shibuya Crossing?
Shibuya Crossing.
Yeah, Shibuya Crossing was crazy.
It doesn't look like the lights, and everything in Times Square, New York. Doesn't have imagine Japanese lettering there.
It's not like that. I think it's much more crazier than Times Square.
It is crazier.
It's very organized crazy. So here's one thing, dude. At one point, at one given time, when Shibuya Crossing, there are four lanes crossing each other, and everybody's going. They know which direction they're going. Nobody does not know where they're going. So that you'll not find anybody stopping in between that road unless they're now in present day social media influencers trying to take pictures and all that.
One could say that Indian traffic also is organized chaos.
Correct.
Organized chaos, correct.
Yeah. So,
but that is something else, man.
The number of people who are walking on the street is massive.
Which is good. Like, why should we give more importance to cars than to people walking? Yeah, I mean, of course, you got to get somewhere and then... But anyways, coming back to the after effects of World War II and the psychological effects, actually.
I think before, first thing I would like to go to, is the good part of war, right? I know it's crazy, good part of war, but the number of countries that got independence from the colonizers because of the World War is crazy. Like I said, Japan conquered so many countries, right? From Dutch, from French.
Right.
So imagine Malaysia and Singapore became independent from British. India became independent from the British.
Right.
Then you had Indonesia coming out of Dutch. You had whole of Africa becoming independent.
Whole of Africa becoming.
So the colonizers lost their power. Yeah, it did help that, they always say Gandhi and Nehru and they all got independence for India. But it was basically the World War II which kind of where UK and France and Dutch, they put so much effort into the war. It weakened them. They had no money left, so they had to kind of loosen their grip on their colonies, and that's why so many countries got their independence. So World War kind of helped a lot of countries in getting their independence and coming out of those 100 years of colonizing, getting suppressed.
Do you know actually how you sound like? You sound like a Hegelian when you basically say that. Okay, in the sense
who's
that,
a Hegelian? Man?
Okay, what I mean by that is like this idea that you have war and you have a lot of suffering, but all of that is kind of going towards some kind of progress, right? So not that you would identify yourself as that, but it just sounds like that. Okay, when you put it that way. There's a very nice I would say, view of this where, okay, so these V2 German rockets, you were talking about the German engineering in these rockets and all. So there comes a point in the trajectory of these V2 rockets where it's no more the fuel of the rocket, okay, that's actually propelling it. It's just momentum and gravity. So in World War II, civilization was like, at that point, it was only, they kind of burned off.
It was only momentum and gravity
that was taking them through it. And they reeled through the after effects, the psychological effects of it, okay, was really, really devastating. Because that led to a great deal of skepticism in a lot of people, because if you kind of track back to how the West kind of thought of itself, is the West was like, for a very long time they thought the earth was flat, and then they're like, they came to know that the earth is not flat, and they're like, new discovery to humankind, the earth is not flat. Okay,
so basically that's what I understand by that is they have the majority power on the media, like for like a propaganda.
Majority power on the media and propaganda is also true, but they kind of like mistake their history as universal human history.
They don't mistake it, they make sure it is.
Okay, you could put it that way, but then first is they kind of like have to deceive themselves into believing that. Okay, and then they make that propaganda come about, okay, that this is how it is. So when the Enlightenment came in the West, right, which is when you had the church, and the church kind of like, they call it the Enlightenment, quote unquote, whatever that means. You had the church that had a stranglehold on people, right? It was, uncontroversially, it was a kind of a corrupt institution, just to put it that way. And then the Enlightenment was like, oh, we have rationality, we have reason, we have science, we have all of these things coming up, right? And things are going to be nice, things are going to be very optimistic. And then what happened? 2 world wars happened. And that okay, and then what happens is 2 world wars happen, and the horrors of war is something that they end up, okay, and then at that point of time they started an introspection and a questioning that can we be wrong, right, and stuff. But again, there is an optimistic aspect of war, as Rohit pointed out, that a lot of countries did get a lot of independence from it, okay, and a lot of colonization actually ended. So do you have anything to add with regards to that?
Independence? I think like before the World War, I was just thinking this, before the World War, right, Japan was in a very good, strong position compared to all the other countries. Like if Japan hadn't been, if US had not entered the war, or even not attacked Japan would have been the strongest country in the world. It was already doing really well by then. They had a lot of control, a lot of resources, and it had ended a lot of colonies in Southeast Asia. And even but by the end of the war, they had in Australia got involved, New Zealand got involved. It was truly a great end of World War. World War I didn't involve the whole war. World War II involved the whole world, where even countries like Papua New Guinea, which is like barely no one even registers the name, right? It was involved in the war. Japan, the Australian government attacked Japan because they thought they would attack Australia next, and then New Zealand, with the help of US, also got Japan back, made Japan retreat for the first time.
Yeah.
So
like D-Day, the Australians and New Zealanders have a day called Anzac Day.
Yeah. So there were 5 countries, right? So which helped in the Pacific War, which is UK, the Australians, New Zealand, Canada, and USA. All 5 are called Five Eyes now. They share intelligence between each other.
Yeah.
Recently they were in the news because of the Khalistan killing.
Oh yeah,
in Canada.
They wanted support.
They said
Canada
that
wanted support from the Five Eyes.
Five Eyes, because all of them are like good friends on the intelligence part, and they have been there since that time, 1945, when they attacked Japan. All of the 5 have been together from then.
Australia, New Zealand,
Canada, US, and UK.
Okay.
So 5. Yeah.
The Five Eyes.
Five Eyes.
You were talking about some day.
Anzac Day.
Anzac Day.
What is that about?
Anzac Day is just that it's like D-Day for the Americans. Anzac Day is like same thing for the New Zealand. Yeah, it's their version.
When they attacked Japan and then got back. Yeah.
Actually, Japan came all the way up till northern Australia, right?
Papua New Guinea is like
so the first time they actually lost ever was in Papua New Guinea when they lost against Australia and combined forces of Australia and US. And then they had to retreat, and then US kept coming back, and then finally they conquered Philippines back, and then slowly, and final stand was in Okinawa in Japan. It was horrible. Like
Oh man.
they were going kamikaze, banzai, all the attacks. Japanese people were dying by like flies, but they didn't give up. They kept fighting, and US were like, by this point they were like, I'm done. We can't fight like this because we are losing a lot of people. So then they went Manhattan Project and nuclear bombs on them because they understood that Japanese would never surrender.
Hold on, another observation. So these guys are like the OG jihadists.
Yeah, the OG. Yeah.
The original jihadists. These guys are like a straight up, man. I cannot take you guys. I'm gonna kill you and kill myself.
Yeah. And the story of how they selected Hiroshima and Nagasaki, do you know that? It's very interesting.
Please
they
tell
said they can't attack Tokyo because it's such a big city, a lot of people would die. And then
How
next
humble
they
of
said
them.
Kyoto. And then apparently one of the, I think Secretary of State in US had his honeymoon in Kyoto and he really liked the city. So he said, no, not Kyoto. And then they went, okay, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then said, okay, fine. And then they dropped it.
I'm not going on any honeymoon there. I don't care. You can bomb it. So there's this other thing about, I'm completely jumping guns, but then this is again back to Mussolini. He was thrown out of his own party actually because it turns out that these Italian forces would go to the US because the Axis were against the Allies, and they would see their cousins in they basically had family in the US, right?
Yeah, of course.
And they'd be like, we don't want to fight our cousins, okay, because if we have to bomb a city, is like this city, oh my I'm thinking about it, my third cousin or fourth cousin
he has a
stays
pizzeria
there. Okay.
over there.
There's a pizzeria over there. I'm not going to basically bomb that, and therefore they didn't like it, and he was thrown out of his own party actually.
He was killed by the Italians at the end. I think the core difference between Hitler and Mussolini was that Hitler was like anti-Jew. He was anti-Semite. He didn't really like Jews, right? But Mussolini, one thing was that it was Italian before religion. If he was Italian Jew, it was still better. Like, okay, you're Italian first, I don't care if you're Jew or not. Mussolini was very nationalistic. He was so nationalistic that he didn't care about religion. He didn't care. Like, as long as you're Italian, I don't care.
He was extremely nationalistic and kind of racist. I think Hitler was racist.
Yeah,
he was only totally racist.
And one more point I would like to come back to in terms of after war is that if there was no world war, we wouldn't have space advancement. Right?
After that was the Cold War.
Which led to space advancements, which also led to nuclear power being, because of the world war, nuclear power being a viable option for energy. Because of the war, they had to develop this, and maybe it would have come up after 50 years, but it was everything was fast forward.
The competition gave birth to all this advancement.
Yeah. All these advancements,
the weapons, the energy, the power, alternative and solar energies, everything is because result of people competing, countries competing against each other, and it wouldn't have happened without the war.
With the fear of being being on the receiving end of the bullet.
Yeah, it's also like a necessity is the mother of invention thing. You can say that this is a competition where it's not really necessary, but it's necessary for them because, as you said, the fear that somebody may throw a bomb at them or something. It's something also like how it happens with Israel, right? Israel is so technologically advanced, okay, in terms of it exports some of the most powerful high-tech exports it's basically got. Why? Because it's surrounded by nations that want it to be dead. So it needs that kind of technological advancement, okay, to take care of itself. So that's again how necessity is the mother of invention.
I was watching the movie Casino the other day.
De
Niro and Pesci.
Oh yes.
And so Pesci says one dialogue which says, he says, I took the diamonds to the sand diggers, the Arabs. I'm like, start laughing. What is this sand diggers? The Arabs?
Casino is like it's a long film, but it's a very interesting film of Scorsese. It's like it doesn't have the flair of Goodfellas.
Yeah.
But it's
but we're going off topic and off layer over here.
No,
so
that's
I think,
okay. It's
I think this we can call this episode an episode.
We should call this episode an episode. It's been quite some time, 57 minutes, and that reminds me of let's not go there.
All right, so
Let's
I'll let you
go
do
there.
the exit as well.
Sure. So that wraps up our second episode on World War II. And we've spoken about a lot of things. We've spoken about Japan, about, the philosophically looking at war and, what is the point of it all, right? What does it all lead to? And that was interesting. In our next episode, what do we do, guys? Tell me. Do we do something on what might be the conditions for another world war or something like that? Or
are we close to one?
Are we close to one? Exactly, because
Yes,
we've been seeing the conflict in the Middle East. We've been seeing Ukraine and Russia,
Which is over now.
which is is it over?
Is it over?
I don't know. It looks like it's over.
Nothing is. It's not over, and a lot of things are brewing with people saying that Middle East. People saying that Hamas, the attack, that Russia is behind between Hamas, going against Israel.
That I think that Ukraine is just making a state.
Yeah, of course. But just saying that these are some of the things that are coming.
Lebanon is set to come in. Syria is set to come into the war.
Iran also is set to come
and
in.
Saudi. So if Iran enters, then Saudi enters against Iran. So it's a massive.
Let's blow each other up.
Iran and Saudi is like that Shia Sunni thing, right? They're always against each other.
Always
right?
against
That
each
used to
other,
be a thing, man. You remember when we were
Still
growing
is.
up? Shia Sunni was like a evident thing that we understood. Okay, Muslims have but this is like a way down the lane topic. But yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll wrap it up here, and then we'll talk about the Middle Eastern conflict in the next episode.
All right, bye bye.
Alright guys, signing off with Shiva here, Rohit and my buddy Pranshu. We will meet you in the next episode, and we'll talk about the conflict in the Middle East and what does that say about the global order and about shit hitting the fan, so to speak. Bye guys.